Greetings and welcome to Conversation with Tony Mobley. Today is March 18th, 2026. This is episode 10 of 2026 for Conversation with Tony Mobley. This conversation uses the TV broadcast software Mimo Live, and we also use Zoom. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by Clarlock Lopez Waterman, and our current team is Laura Thompson, Zachary Sorensen, and Mickey McAture. Thank you, sir. Thank you, team. Additional support comes from JJ McKenna and Tamara Pinka. ConversationWithTonyMobley.com is our website. We're also using an interactive chat. It is called Mukana, and it's courtesy of Alex Lindsay and 090. There you can ask your questions, and your questions can be voted up or down. That's right. You can ask a question, and the audience will vote your question up or down. You can also watch Conversation with Tony Mobley on our website at conversationwithTonyMobley.com. We have had an eventful 2026 year so far. We started with theater professional and college professor Jessica Lopez Barkle. Then we had Ken Jordan, and he talked about the importance of quality when using AI. Rose McNulty, a digital magician and fashion meets the future personality, talked about the importance of the Vision, Apple Vision Pro, and she's an evangelist for the Vision Pro. We also had two of the trio that make up the last Angry DJ show, Mitchell Hill and Mark Giuliani. They were celebrating 100 shows. We had Gary B. Jr., the free show evangelist, for part 2 of his conversation about free show. And then we had the missionary himself, AJ, the CEO. On February 25th, we had an educational panel that included Ms.Shontelle Jackson, Rabbi David Paskin, and Ms. Carissa Worthy. And then last week we had Mr. Ricardo Hicks, CEO and president of the Tech Factory. And on today's show, we have an educational panel, and the conversation is about education and AI. And we're going to get right into it. And we're just going to start with, please tell us how you got started in AI. And we're going to start with Ms.Shontelle Jackson.
Good evening. I am Shontelle Jackson. I got started in AI just because I love technology and I like to use technology within our special education classroom. So AI kind of, when it hit I guess the circuits or waves or whatever, I just kind of picked up on it and started using it personally, and then started integrating into my classroom.
All right. We're going to go to Mrs. Emily Russo.
Hey, let's see. How did I get into it? Well, I think Jonas brought it to my attention in November of 2022. And by February of 2023, I was presenting at the Distance Learning Consortium on AI and what it could do. And then I became the de facto AI person at my company, where we create educational technology, training, strategy, and engineering. And now we guide all of our clients through how they're going to integrate AI into their products, trainings for teachers, and how it, having the conversations about how it fits into education.
Rabbi David Paskin.
I got into it out of necessity. With our elementary program, I needed my kids to be able to do research, and I really wanted them to go out and do this research on their own instead of me handing them things to read and learn about. So I ended up vibe coding an app, which is sort of in some ways it's a chatbot, but I basically hard coded information, or I taught the AI what I wanted it to know to give to the kids. And I put up some really strict guardrails, and they've been using it, and it's been fantastic. It's not perfect, but it's fantastic. And so it's given my students a freedom that I don't think I could have given them before. So out of necessity for me.
Okay. Our next question is, please give us an overview of the current state of AI use in schools, the good and the bad. And we'll start with Rabbi David Paskin.
I can't speak broadly to its use in schools. Here, I can speak to my own personal experience. I've been surprised at the negativity that I've seen and heard from some folks. And I've experienced that in two levels. One is the sort of general, I don't like AI because they stole other people's work and I don't trust it, and so I don't want to use it. Okay. But then the other piece is, which surprised me, but it's real, is this looks like AI. Like when something looks like AI, that we've created within ourselves an aversion to something that looks or sounds like AI. I know we were all worried at first about how we're going to be able to tell the difference. I think that a lot of us can spot an AI image right away. And so I've been interested by a lot of the pushback that I've gotten. At the same time, I think that a lot of folks are using it really effectively. I think that some of the big companies are using it really effectively. I'd love to hear, Emily, about what your company is doing with this. But so I've had a mixed bag, a mixed reaction, actually.
Emily.
Well, I'm not in the classroom as much, so I'm seeing it more from the outside by attending conferences where I speak to teachers about how it's going in the classroom. And I, of course, was in the classroom for 14 years, so my friends, keep me informed about how it's going. And I think the big thing that we need to accept is that this is like the calculator, right? Like it's not going away. Pandora got let out the box. We're going to have to deal with it. And that's going to make us have to rethink the way we teach, the questions that we ask, the tasks that we ask students to do, because they can just ask a bot to go find the information for them. I think it's more important, and I've been seeing this shift most recently into AI literacy. But I think educators need the AI literacy just as much, if not more, than the students need it, because the students are willing to play with it and figure it out, and they may be misguided sometimes. But the educators that are resistant, or that are not even resistant out of like negativity, just out of like, it scares me, I don't really want to touch it, or, they're not sure how to prompt to get the thing that they're looking for. I think that those kind of things really need to come to the top for education to be effective and to really change. And I'm hoping that it changes the way that we teach. We've been trying forever. I know since I've been in the classroom, which, was 2006, 7 was the first year I was in the classroom. Like, it's like, oh, we're going to reinvent education. We're going to do project-based, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to make it about portfolios, and we're going to change the way. And then the test is still there, and the state testing is still there. And, so this new tool that's available, the students are going to take advantage of it, as they do. But I think everybody needs that new level, and the teachers need to think about, the educators need to think about, how are we using that tool and changing the way that we teach in the classroom.
Shontelle?
I 100% agree with Emily about the literacy portion of it. I personally try super hard to integrate that into my lessons for the students because I have middle schoolers. So we're going from middle to high. So I'm trying to teach some good skills of how to use AI purposefully and not just for the negative part. Of course, we laugh and joke about the little AI crap they make. That's, the funny things because of course it's fun and I don't want to take that part of education out because if you take that part of education out you no longer get students who want to dig in and learn. um, but I also think that it is super important for the educator to have that literacy in order for us to be able to teach our students which prompts um, to ask the bot to tell them about. um, the standards I'm looking at are written to talk to what Emily was talking about the testing. Standards are written for application, but the tests are written for regurgitation. So I think that if we get that to align a little more, then I think we'll be able to use AI more for its purpose and more um, productive.
It looked like Emily was giving you an amen. Is that right?
And David
Is that
wanted to ask
right?
something.
Go ahead, Emily.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I keep up with a bunch of influencers in the space, like learning designers, people that are creating. There's a woman, Dr. Phil, out of the UK, and she brought to our attention last week in the newsletter that like MIT Media Lab just did a study on giving feedback. So they gave the same feedback from an AI and from a human teacher to a student. And it was the exact same feedback. It wasn't different. And yet, when the kids knew it was coming from AI, they put in less effort to do because they didn't want to impress AI, but they want to impress their teacher. And so, when the reason I'm bringing this up is like that whole like educator relationship is super important. So I think like talking about AI is not going to replace the educator in the classroom can take away some of that fear. But I really think that learning design, the way that we're using AI in the classroom, the way, like I often reflect, I used to teach AP language. And one of the things that I think about is like, if I was teaching that now and my students used it to write essays, like that would be awful, right? But if I used it to have it create an argument and then had the students break down the argument that the AI came up with and tell me why it worked or why it didn't work, or label the pathos and the ethos and, the logos and things like that, I think that that would be very informative for the students, to be able to quickly create examples and get hands-on with something as opposed to like looking at something that was pre-created and you can't really make it interesting to the students because maybe they're not into that topic or whatever. But I do think that, the human relationships and keeping the human in the middle when we're using AI is definitely the most important thing when it comes to education, is not turning it all over to AI.
Rabbi David, you were not shaking your head, so I know you want to say something else on
no,
this subject.
Keeping the human in the center. I mean, there's simply nothing more important than that. I taught a professional development for my teachers. These are preschool and elementary school teachers just before December break on AI, on how to use AI, and I was really surprised at how what's the word? They are. These are all young folks, but they are AI infants in the way that they use it. I was really surprised that none of them had thought to say to AI, here's the lesson that I'm teaching. I have a student who really can't sit still. What kind of adjustments can I make to this lesson to accommodate that child? So I guess where I'm coming from, or where I'm going, is I really want to encourage educators to use this tool to better themselves, to do better work. I give access to a lot of different tools to my educators to help them think through ideas, to help them ideate, to help them to go back. I have an hour drive to work every morning. I spend 45 minutes of that having a conversation with ChatGPT. I mean, we just go back and forth, and it challenges me on everything that I do. The reason I think that is so important to teach teachers is because our kids are already doing that. I have a 17-year-old, and I gave her my credentials to my ChatGPT so she can have the plus version. That also means I get to see every chat that she has. And she is having fantastic chats about homework that she's working on or papers that she's writing, Emily. And so our kids are going to use this. We have to know how to use it well so that we can teach them how to use it well.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so our next question is from James Flosslin from Minneapolis. And I'm going to just say, I'm going to read this question, and I'm going to allow you to choose when you come in to respond to this question, because it might take you a minute to respond to this question. So James says, how does AI challenge the questions? How do we know what we know? What are the questions we seek? And I'm just going to let you guys pop in when you want to.
I think Rabbi David already answered that question. He challenges his bot by having conversations with it. It knows as much as you ask it. The deeper you go, the deeper the bot goes.
And you can
Okay.
also, I train my, how you can personalize the experience you have. So one of the I can't open it now because one of the things I put in there is challenge me. Like, don't accept what I say to you. And it's happened now, I'd say 3 times when one time was I had to speak to a teacher about something uncomfortable. One was I had to speak to a parent. And I'm a very, I move too quickly sometimes. And so I put into chat what I was thinking. And chat said to me, David, you don't want to do that. Think of it this way. And it was right on. It was so right. So I'm sometimes I feel like it knows more than I know, and I'm fine with that.
Okay. Emily?
I mean, that question, how do we know what we know? I think that's part of where the AI literacy really needs to come in, because you do have to be aware of how AI works. And AI works on a token system, and it puts things together that most likely will go together based on tokens, not based on knowledge. Now, it is getting much better, much faster, much more responsive, and you can guardrail it, like building your own agents within your AI tenant. Like in Claude, I have a project there where I uploaded, I am the president of my DPOA or my POA, which is like a homeowners association type situation. And I uploaded all our governing documents. So whenever a neighbor's like, oh, can I do and I'm like, I don't know, I'm the president, but I don't know. I've only been doing this for so long. I can ask and it'll pull that up, and it'll only look at our governing documents in North Carolina state law. It won't go and pull everything in, which is really helpful. I have a good starting point. And I think those are the kind of things that the educators need to understand and the students need to understand, because how do you know that the information you're getting from the chatbot or from the tool is giving you accurate information? Who created that information? It is a very biased system if you don't go in and set your guardrails or choose where the information is getting pulled from. I mean, the internet is a very dark and vast landscape, hellscape, maybe some people would even say, of, information. And I think it's important that, we take that into consideration. It might see things and respond in ways that we're not comfortable with because it's wrong. Whatever it's coming back with might be incorrect, might be biased, might be pulled from a resource. I think all of the chat bots have gotten much better at sourcing information. So they'll tell you where they got it from. That's helped like tremendously with some of that. But you still have to question it. You still have to have conversations with other human beings about, like, I think this about this topic, what do you think? And get exposed to other people's points of view, and not become isolated in the tool itself. We talk a lot about loneliness being a really big problem, especially among teenagers right now. And so I think, just letting them loose with some of these chat bots, whether they're created specifically for students or not, is something that we need to take into consideration when choosing when and where to use these tools.
Okay. Thank you all. We have a question from Vic Fernandez from the rundown of last week's show of the rundown. Sweden's decision to abandon its digital first education goals and replace tables with books, paper, and pen, a harbinger of a return to analog, or it's a failure of the educational system to significantly integrate digital resources. So what do you guys think?
I think this is super interesting. It feels like I get it. Like I can imagine myself saying, you know what, this stuff, it's not ready for prime time yet. Right now it's getting in the way. Let's put a hold on it. I get that. I think it's naive, but I get it. I'm not sure what to make of the rest of it.
Yeah, I just went to NC Ties, which is the North Carolina Teachers in Technology and Education conference last week. And one of the things that was interesting is there are educators who are doing this on their own. They're saying no more one-to-one devices in my classroom. Shut them down. I don't know if it's burnout left over from the pandemic that shall not be named, or whether it's like just this fear of AI or not being able to control things. But what I do need people to understand is that, like I said, Pandora is out of the box. You're not stuffing her back in there. It's not happening. So if you don't prepare your students, your child, for a world where AI is expected to be used. My company went from being me giving tech talks on our once a month all hands meetings about what AI can do and how you could use it, and being forbidden from using it with our client work, to now being expected to use it within our client work, for different levels, not for content creation necessarily, but for editing, for having a brainstorming partner and those kinds of things. And I think, if you're shutting it down, there's a conversation to be had about how we phase it in. Like, do we start with kindergartners and do we move it up, or how much exposure throughout, K through 12, I think is a conversation we can have. But if we're shutting it down completely and saying pen and paper, when that student walks into a career or a university and they don't know how to use those tools, they will be so much further behind than the rest of the team, the other kids in the room, that puts you at a disadvantage. And I think economically, for a community like or a country, or even like a state, because I know that some of the states in the US have started deciding they're going to be banning one-to-one or reducing the amount of screen time. I think, it really needs to be thought out about how are we going to prepare them for this future that already exists and is only going to continue to go forward, and say, here's a piece of paper and a blue book and a pen, and you don't get to use a computer. I don't know how that's going to pan out for the future.
Emily, can I push back a little bit?
Sure.
I'm wondering. So I wonder. I think that presumes that if that presumes that kids are going to get, or that kids get their technological AI education in school. And I think I would argue that they're going to get that regardless of whether we have a one-to-one program in school. They're going to learn how to use these tools regardless. And that maybe, I can't believe I'm suggesting this, but maybe school could be the one place where they don't use these tools, and we could focus on the character development. We could focus on persistence, grit, and all of those sorts of things. I don't know. I just.
Yeah, I hear you. I would push back on that and say AI has the ability to level the playing field. I was fortunate to grow up with two parents that had college degrees who read every paper that I ever wrote in high school and edited it. I had a classmate who was raised in the foster care system and did not have that opportunity. How is that any different than me having access to AI and understanding how to use it correctly? And also, ask those AI literacy questions like, am I using this? Do I understand how it's working? Do I understand what I should be looking for as flags on something that I write? Am I prompting it correctly? And if you're expecting them to get that on their own, they might watch a couple TikTok videos on, AI prompting, but I doubt it. It's gonna be passed through the grapevine. And then the kids who have parents who are using AI, the kids who have parents that are white collar workers who are using these tools are going to prepare their students better than students who are at a disadvantage. And I think public education has always been the leveler in the sense of it doesn't matter. This is the place where you can come to learn, and we're all going to learn together and get to graduation. And here are the standards that the state expects you to be able to do. But if you take that away and expect them to learn on their own, I don't think we're going to get a level playing field. And I think the digital divide is going to get even bigger than it already is. And the digital divide that currently exists in the United States is sad. Like, we really need to, be getting these tools into every student's hands. And it's not about having a one-to-one device in the classroom all the time. It's using a device, the tool, when it's appropriate to use the tool. So we're about to go do a research paper, or we're about to go explore this, I don't know, science theory. Like, you could use the AI to start those projects. You could bring those AI tools in later into the project. It doesn't have to be all the time. It's just another tool in our backpack, just like our calculator. We all have the scientific calculator. I still don't know what 90% of those buttons actually do, but we all had it, and we were allowed to use it. So I think that's really the question that I'm looking at, is how do we use AI to level the playing field for more students, for more access for the kids that don't have opportunities.
Wow. You sound like somebody I know, Emily, when Shontelle, did you want to share
I was
anything?
just gonna I think Emily kind of picked up on what I was thinking. You're widening that gap for your typical have-not students. Um, some kids will not get that technology at home because they do not have cell phones. Their parents may have cell phones, but they have the government issued cell phone that calls out text messages. Then you also have that literacy gap, where we have students, and this is just speaking from my public school system that I work in. Kids are graduating high school reading less than a fourth grade level. So AI is assisting with those students to be able to function in our world because it kind of lessens that reading gap, so to speak. You can go home, and some students, as Emily was saying, I came from a household where both my dad and mom could read and could proofread my papers. But some of these students are going home with parents who read on a lower level than they do, if at all. So your AI or your technology may be the only proofreader they get besides their teacher. when the teacher is not available to provide that middle human point or person to, kind of bring all these things together. But I think it's still also important to make sure that the teacher is there to teach them how to use it in order to be productive at home and when they leave the public school realm, so that they can be productive employees in whatever they decide to go into.
And I just want to add to that really quickly, because like the other thing is we have students that are in homes where their parents don't speak English. And AI has been proven as recently as February that they give less accurate and less truthful responses to people with lower English proficiency, to people with less formal education, and to people with non-US backgrounds, because it's heavily based in US culture. And so I think that, having that common denominator of the classroom, public school teacher, providing those skills and those, like, this is how you use this tool, levels that playing field even further for those students who are at an extra disadvantage.
Yeah, I'm drawing back to a couple of things. First thing is my first 2 years, and I was a supply teacher or a substitute teacher, depending on where you live. That you know what that is, and so part of that experience for me was that this school was in the projects of Atlanta. And we had to provide lotion, soap and water, clothing, clean clothing. We had to provide things that people normally get at home. And so in me looking at AI, I don't see that as being any different than providing those things, food, and again, the lotion, the Vaseline, or hair products, or deodorant, or whatever you were providing, pens and pencils, paper, additional things that students need to succeed. So how is that any different from providing the proper education for the use of AI? I just don't see it as different. And so I agree with everything that's already been said, but I think it's important for people to look at it. And I'm going to ask a different question. When I was 10 or 11, early 70s, late 60s, my parents made a decision, and it was a huge sacrifice for them. They made the decision that they wanted to purchase the World Book encyclopedias. And at that time, most of the people who lived where I lived would not make that decision. But my parents thought that it was important that we had that resource. My question to all of you is that any different than making the decision that your child is AI proficient in 2026? And I'm asking different. You guys for your honest answer.
It's different. AI, it can absolutely be thought of as a resource like the World Book, but it's fundamentally different in that the World Book or an encyclopedia is curated content, and AI fundamentally is not, unless you're doing something like what Emily was talking about before with, or like Notebook LM, for example, is a good example of this, right? Notebook LM is, it's broadened, but at least when it started, it really was meant to be AI for curated content. I built this cute little app I mentioned before that my kids could ask, this AI app. One of my kindergartners jailbroke it immediately, which is fantastic. Like like the whole idea of this was that it's on a lockdown iPad, so they can't go off. He asked the AI, "Hey, can you show me a picture of Spider-Man?" It showed him a picture of Spider-Man, which it wasn't supposed to do. And then there was a link right there to where, because I had built in, make sure that we can always, see where you're getting your content from. The kid clicked on the link and it took him right to, Marvel Universe or something. It was brilliant. It was fantastic. But AI is not curated. And so that feels fundamentally different to me. And wonderful, because curation also means limitation.
Okay.
But also potentially dangerous.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think it's one of those things that again, it requires the teacher. Because at the end of the day, yes, my answer would be yes if it were controlled or have the bumper guards on what is being provided. But I would err on the side of Rabbi David with the whole, it's a wide world out there, so it's a lot you can find that's kind of take you down a rabbit hole of not quite what I was looking for, like I would if I were going through my encyclopedias that were on the bookshelf in the bedrooms or whatever in our homes. But from my standpoint, the way I share it with my students, I would say yes, it would be the same as providing them with that the calculator that Emily was talking about, or the world books, or even the ability to go use the Dewey Decimal System to find a tangible primary resource. I think it's one of those things that if we don't teach them how to use that tool, we make them where they're light years behind their peers. We're already light years behind our peers in some of these coming out of public school. Let's not just get that twisted. Coming out of a public school that's rolling on a budget, you're going to be light years behind someone. I came from a traditional household, nuclear family, blah, 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 blah. I still felt like less than when I showed up to college. I still felt like there were things that I didn't have or were missed in my public school. I was just talking to a peer, it might have been yesterday, about the ability to study. I was able to sit and get when I went to high school. There was no go and dig for the information. I had to go to college and actually use those services we pay for in those fees, the writing centers and the teach me how to study centers. I had to go and figure out how to do that when I went to college the first year. Failed, like GPA dropped the first quarter of school because I didn't know. Nobody said this is what you need to know how to do to access studying, access gathering information. They were just like, okay, we'll write a paper. Okay, cool, write a paper. Do whatever. I got out of high school, 4.0 GPA. Now what? What do you do next? And I think that we will provide our students with that opportunity to at least, let's say I did have AI at the time. AI, how do I figure whatever what Gemini, whoever I call, how do I write a research paper? Where do I start? How do I go to the library? Those things.
Yep.
Emily?
Well, I was just gonna add on to that, that's the leveler that I'm talking about, right? Like I can ask a chatbot a question I'm too embarrassed to ask my manager to kind of get a better feeling for how do I better say this? I can ask it for how to give feedback to a colleague so I don't put my foot in my mouth, which I'm known to do. Those kind of things. So if you are a student and you're the first in your family to go to school, or you came out of a system that allowed you to, go through the system without learning certain skills, like studying. Shontelle, what she was saying, that was my first year of college too. I was like, oh, dang, I was up here in my high school and now I'm down here in my maybe sub down here, in my college experience. And it was that preparation. And sometimes you're too embarrassed to go into the library and say to someone I don't understand how this works. I remember the copy machine worked with our ID card and I could not, that was the first time I'd ever I didn't know how it worked. I didn't understand. And like, I was really nervous to go ask someone for help. I went to the math center, same thing. Like, I don't know how I'm still here, like taking Algebra 1 for the third time in my life, like, and still don't get it. Like, why, and I think that's where some of that learning and education use of AI can help some of those kids that are more nervous to ask the question, that don't know how to ask the question. They don't know what they're trying to ask. It could help with that. So, I mean, I don't know, the world book is static, right? It doesn't change. AI has changed so fast in the last 2.5 years. Like, it went from being something that was fairly inaccurate but fun to something that is now creating like passable diagrams for me at work to explain a flow chart to someone. I can build RAG systems where I can say only pull from this information. So to David's point, having like Notebook LM is the new way kids are studying first class. They are putting all that curated information from their courses, their recorded lectures, anything that they can get their hands on that has to do with their information, and they're putting it into a notebook, and then they're asking questions to the notebook. They're saying like, can you explain this concept to me in a way that I might understand? And because you can curate it to yourself, if you know that you learn better through analogy, or that you want to listen to a podcast version because you retain stuff by listening to it, then why not have that tool available and used? But if they don't know it exists, they don't know how to use it effectively, then what's what does that do for them? It doesn't, it puts them behind, because like I said, everybody's using it now at different levels. Different companies are requiring you to use it in different ways. And actually, I'm just going to throw this out here real quick. One thing that I had just recently heard at one of the AI meetings that I had with one of my clients is that at college now, there are conscientious objectors to AI. And these are students that are saying to their professors, I'm not going to use it because it's bad for the environment, or because the information is stolen, was trained on stolen information, or it takes away creativity, right? And those kids are asking their professors for a equal experience without using AI. And these are professors that are using AI in their coursework. And the professors were saying that there really is no way for us to offer you that same level, that same experience without using the tool, because you would have to spend months in the stacks, digging out every article, looking up every book, trying to find the information that you need on the internet, vetting it and everything else. Whereas you could just jump ahead. But it was interesting to find that these conscientious objectors are actually, standing up for something they believe in, which, the environmental impact. Yeah, what is that doing to our communities, and who gets to say, and how is that going to cause more issues? But I think all of those things are why we need to keep having the conversations, like, what is this doing? How are we using it? What does it really do? And what is it really good at helping us with?
Yeah, I get it too. For as far as those objectives are in terms of, what, who just decides what community gets the data center in their backyard, and how it impacts their environment and their water and all their stuff. But at the same time, the question that I raised based on what you just said, Emily, is that there are students who don't even know enough to ask the LLM the question that you put forth, in terms of taking the actual curated information and putting it in there, and then using it as a study guide, and the exchange that goes back and forth. The digital divide is real, because another high school student that maybe, or college student that's doing that, is asking the AI questions about, whatever, that does not have the impact of impact of helping their education process or helping them to move forward. And I guess my question to you guys is, how do we bridge that gap? Is there a way to bridge that gap? How do we bridge the gap? Because there is a gap.
There is a gap, and going back to that AI literacy, we need the training. But also companies like Microsoft are creating tools specifically for students. So like there is now the research agent. So these are agents, they're not just chat bots, they're actual agents that the students can run. So they have a research agent, they have a study and learn agent, which helps the students learn themselves. So like they're say I have a test on, microbiology and I need to know whatever, and it will go back and forth with them. It'll create flashcards, it'll do sample tests, it'll explain concepts to them. So those agent tools, those education specific tools that are being created need to be available. The unfortunate part is some of those tools are behind paywall, right? So if your school isn't a Microsoft school, if your school isn't a certain level license of Microsoft, you may not have access to those tools. You might not understand how to create your own tool on your a GPT of choice. Like in Gemini, you can create a gem. In the Claude, you can create a project. In Chat GPT, you can create I don't know what they call them in that. I use them. I just don't remember what they're called.
The GPT.
Yeah, it's like a little bot that'll do whatever you want it to do. And I think those are the things that, like, as we build the knowledge K through 12, like if right now, I had to pull something out and tell a superintendent, this is what you should do. Elementary should definitely understand it's not magic. It's not something that just creates things out of nothing. And there are programs that are coming out from people like Digital Promise and other organizations that are putting together curriculum that explains that to the kids. Lego just put one out that was really cool looking. But it's like, that's what we should focus on at that age. Like, yes, you can ask it a question, it'll get you the information you want, but this is how that works. And then at the middle school level, we should talk about, how do you understand what what it's giving you is good information? How do you verify that that's what it is? And then at the high school level, we should be teaching them how to build their own agents. We should be teaching them to use agents that already exist to help them get ahead or to understand more or better or more deeply than they already do, not just to write their paper for them or do their homework for them. And again, I think that goes back to not only AI literacy for the educators and the students, but also that idea of what tasks we're asking students to complete needs to change. The way that we learn needs to change. And do I have the answer to that? No. If I did, wouldn't be here. I'd be writing my book, getting famous. But I think that's the thing we all need to take into consideration as we go through these tools, is that there's no easy answer, because all of the tools have different barriers, whether those barriers are cost barriers, information barriers, access in general to certain types of information. Like, it may only have free information on it. It may only have, a certain level. I remember back when ChatGPT would be like, I can tell you something, but only up till October 24th, 2022. Like, I can't update the information because I don't know. Like, how do we know what it knows? How do we know how it's reasoning? And I think you can ask the bots, and most of the time they'll tell you that. How do you know that that's truthful? How do you know that it's not trying to deceive you? Which, if you don't understand how it works, you're more apt to fall for the deep fakes, for the misinformation, for the things that you don't understand. So
that's my battle. That's my battle, the battle that I go through almost every day. I'll ask my ChatGPT a question, and I think about it, and then I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me. I said, can you verify? I asked it, can you verify your statement? And then it'll say, This question is verified. I said, can you search the web and verify your statement? Oh, I apologize.
Actually,
You were you were so right. And I said, well, why do you keep giving me why are you still hallucinating and giving me incorrect information? Well, I really can't really speak to that, but it's so good that you are able to um, correct me when I need correcting. And I'm like, so what that told me was that I will not just use one AI for anything. If I'm going to ask it something that I think is critical and really important to me, I'm going to use several different AIs that don't have a relationship. And so I use them all. Or I shouldn't say I use them all, but I use most of the major ones that people talk about, and I just cross check with each one. But before we move on, did anybody else want to share anything? Go ahead, Rabbi.
Can I'd like to offer something a little different. We've talked about how we should use AI in the classroom. We've talked about how teachers can use AI. We've talked about AI education. But one thing we haven't talked about is, and you, Shontelle, you made me think of this when you were talking about research papers. We haven't talked about how AI should change other education. I'm thinking about what are the things that we are still teaching our children that they really don't need to know in the new AI world? And what are the things that we're not teaching them that they might need to know? Research is a really interesting area because on the one hand, I lament the fact that AI is sort of doing away with traditional research. I don't research anything the same way anymore. And it's a lot less work. I'm not having to put in as much work to it. It's much more of, like you were saying, Tony, of, did the AI get it right rather than doing the searching myself? On the other hand, how fantastic is it that I can do research so much more simply? So I'm curious about what are the things that are legacy areas of education that we're still holding on to that we really should let go of and jettison.
What's turning in my head is I'm already in the 24th century and with Star Trek and everything that goes there. And I think to answer your question, Rabbi David, is that the students and children will naturally create the shortcuts that they need to be able to move to that space, and they'll be able to move to that space naturally if we are providing the things that they need so that they can skip the steps that are holding them back from our baggage. I'm just going to call it baggage, our baggage that is holding them back, and that maybe there is a space where in the 24th century, a PhD is a high school student or elementary school student. Maybe that is what happens if things continue to progress the way in which they do. I'm not sure that I think that people come to those things naturally through exposure. And I think, our conversation last Thursday where I talked about, learning how to drive with a stick. And most people now don't know how to drive with a stick, nor are they even interested in learning how to drive with a stick, because that's not that's not part of the technology that they need to embrace unless they're going to be,
Tony,
professional truck drivers.
Can we take that even further? I mean, I think it's a fair question to say in 10 years, in 5 years, will we even need to teach people how to drive? Forget
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So do we need to teach children anymore how to do research, or do we need to teach children how to validate research? Do we need to teach children how to find content, or do we need to teach children how to curate content? I don't know. I'm genuinely asking.
Maybe it's a question of, do we need to teach children how to properly prompt?
That, and
I don't think so.
What I thought about when you were talking, Tony, about how you triangulate the data. That's the way I see it. I see it as in, yes, teach them how to ask the right prompts, but also validate the correct information, that the information is correct. However, I still feel like we still need to be able to understand that there are primary resources that we can reach back to in order to validate those. Some of those things the bots may not be able to validate. We may have to reach back and touch the paper. I don't think we should go completely away from the foundations. I really like the way Emily said I called it because I wrote it down as the foundation of digital literacy. So you start with that foundation, kind of like when you're teaching kids to read, the science of reading. You start with the A's, the B's, the sounds, the match, the words, and all of those things. And then you're creating that foundation, but then you're at the same time, you're teaching them how to use these tools, integrate these tools as they're learning those basic foundations. So you're teaching AI literacy as you're teaching me to learn, like the information that the standards that I'm learning. The question I was left with when all of you guys were talking was, what's the purpose of education? Isn't it kind of to spark people to want to know more, to create, to dig into what you already said and question everything you said, so that, because isn't that kind of what our professors told us as we were going through school? Question everything you read, question everything someone says. So I think we got to remember that's our purpose, is to spark the desire to get knowledge.
Thank you, Shontelle. Go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, I just wanted to add really quickly to that question about research, right? If we stop wondering, if we stop asking the questions, the GPTs are just going to regurgitate the information that's already been found and already been researched on. So if we're not teaching kids how to scientifically research things, to understand the world around them, the GPT, I can go look up something on a GPT to understand a concept or whatever. But if I'm going to be doing deep research that is going to change the way we look at education or change the way that we do that, like the science of reading went through a whole thing of people going back to basics and saying, hey, these people got on a bus a couple years ago and they changed the way we learned to read, and it hurt kids. It didn't help them. And now we're going back to the science of reading, what actually the science says. So I guess what I'm trying to say is we can't become over reliant on AI to do everything for us, because I wish I could remember the name of this theory. It's circulating around AI communities about once the research stops, if people stop are only using bots to create their research or to do their research, whether it's on a low level or a high academic level, eventually it's going to run out of new stuff. You know what I mean? We're going to become over
if we're not creating,
right? If we're not creating, yeah. So if we're not creating, yeah. So I think that's the thing. School should be about wonder. It should be about understanding. It should be about creating. It should be about experimenting that leads to those next questions, to those next ideas, the big ideas that change us. And I don't think, no matter what they say about these, chat bots and things like that, or AI in general, that it's going to ever get to that point where it's going to wonder for us, I wonder why X happens, right? Like we're humans. That's what changes us from the bots. The bots are going to go, oh, that happens because X, Y, Z, but it may be only based on the information that came from 50 years ago and not new information that has been entered into the conversation. So anyway, I'll stop there. I could talk about this all night.
Yeah, we're down to the last, actually the last two questions. We just might not get to the last question. I want to ask this question because I think it's important. What do parents need to know about AI in March of 2026? What do parents need to know?
I'm going to jump in with just the privacy issue, which is they need to be questioning their education, their schools where their children are, what are they using? What information are they giving? Um, People's personal information is the most valuable thing that we own, and we are quickly losing control of it when it gets entered into these large LLMs, which, I think, knowing what tools your school's using, what information they're giving, and whether or not they've vetted the tools, because there are so many tools coming out so fast, geared strictly at educators, that if your school doesn't have or your district doesn't have a policy in place, you can very quickly expose sensitive data of your students to things that you don't want.
Thank you, Emily. Shontelle?
I agree with Emily. The biggest thing is privacy and teaching our students or their students to ask the question, should I put this information here? Because sometimes it's the simple, is it okay to put my full name? Is it okay to put my street address? No, it's not. Put the schools. It's just like, just kind of just the knowledge of, and always reminding our students and our children to be mindful of their personal privacy first. And yes, always wonder, stay in that mind of wonder and support the wonder.
I agree. Rabbi, you're going to have the last word.
I would I would just say teach your kids to ask good questions. Just teach them how to ask questions. Stop. Who cares what the answer is? It's so not important. I had a family come in today to tour my school, and I said to them, I would so much rather your daughter get something wrong than get something right. Getting something right is boring. Getting something wrong means you get to iterate. You get to ask the question differently. You get to try something new. That's learning. So ask good questions and keep asking questions. And if chat is a place for you to ask, go for it. Like, ask questions. That you don't have to worry about privacy issues. If you're not telling it anything, you're just asking it things. You're not telling it your name. You're not telling it. You're just asking questions. Ask.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank all of you for having and participating in this conversation with me. I really appreciate all of you. And I don't know how we get around not having another part two to the AI in education. But again, thank you all so much for being here. You can watch Conversation with Tony Mobley live or on our website at conversationwithtonymobley.com. Conversation with Tony Mobley is produced by Claude Lopez Waterman. Our current team is Laura Thompson, Zachary Sorensen, Mickey McAture, and thank you, sir. Thank you, team. Hey, you said that in the beginning. Why did you say that? Because I'm thankful for the team that I have and the fact that they are sacrificing their time to help me have these conversations. Thank you, Mimo Live. Thank you, Zoom, for making this broadcast possible. We have conversations with real people. Stay tuned for new episodes and great conversations. Conversation with Tony Mobley. Thank you, everyone, for the nearly 200 plus conversations on Conversation with Tony Mobley. And I'm going to make it my business to tell you guys exactly how many conversations that we have so that going forward, we'll share that. We ask that when you have time, please go back, take a look at our past conversations, and we think that you might find something that is helpful or that you really like. We want to say thank you, panel. Thank you for being a part of our conversation today and for doing the work you do and for being the people who you are. Next week, pay attention now. Next week, Ken Jordan is coming back and he has a new AI tool that he's going to unveil for the very first time on Conversations with Tony Mobley. So you don't want to miss it. Please feel free to support Conversation with Tony Mobley by volunteering or donating. Don't you want to learn how to use Mimo Live? Don't you want to know how to integrate Mimo Live and Zoom? Feel free to donate your time to Conversation with Tony Mobley. We want to keep Conversation with Tony Mobley running. So if you want to do a financial donation to Conversation with Tony Mobley, we ask that you go to our website. Please like, subscribe, and comment on YouTube. We want to keep getting better. We want to get better. We want to continue to get better. We want to continue to learn. We want to continue to inspire good conversations. And we're going to say good night to everyone. Again, I want to thank my panel for being here and giving us their time. I'm going to say God bless you. Take care. Good night.